Welcome back, folks. This is RGR and Locked On Chiefs, kind of all done at once, and that's because you got to make the most of your time. And Matt Derrick's with us. How are you, Matt?
I'm well, Ryan. How are you doing?
I'm having fun right now. Smashing rumors, trying to see what's going on. A lot of theories lately. And for me in particular, I've been really focused on what's going on around the rest of the league. And that's what I want to start with, because we're not going to hear from the team for very much between now and whenever they try to do camp. And the try is the specific word that comes to my mind. The outbreak, quote unquote, of Cowboys players, Texas players in general that are now sick with the virus. And I don't know how many of them were together when they might have been working out or whatever. But now the league doesn't want anybody to work out until they get to camp. That's got to be kind of scary for the future, right?
Yeah, and it's a little bit, the notice coming out from Dr. Sills to say that they don't want any of the players working out on their own. Kind of after the cows are already out of the barn, because players have been doing that. And now you're getting to the time of year where the players aren't doing that. I mean, once you get to mid-June, last week, the Chiefs shut down all their OTAs. I mean, that was their rounding up. So they shut down all their virtual workouts last week. And everybody's gone their own separate ways. And that's usually what the plan is for NFL players. You get to mid-June, and that's their vacation time. That's their last chance before the season to get away. So that's been on the schedule and the calendar all along for these guys. Is that this is their time to power down. So really over the next few weeks before training camp, there wouldn't be a whole lot of guys getting together. Yeah, last year, I think the Chiefs had a little kind of vacation for some of the pass catchers and quarterbacks right before. But, there's really not that whole lot. I mean, a lot of it has been happening over the last few weeks. Sure, Chiefs have certainly been some of the teams doing it. Some of those guys working off on their own together. So, the saying at this point, they should have said that 2 months ago if they wanted it to have any effect.
I'm with you. And we did see footage, from a week or two ago with Mahomes throwing to Kelsey and Garrett Dieter and a couple of others. But I think it's interesting that it seems like Andy Reid in particular has set this up to be as close to business as usual, schedule-wise, as it possibly can. And you're right, they should be out and scattered. Hopefully no chartered fishing trips or anything like that. But if they can maintain that, how do you feel overall after what we've seen for the offseason program about how they're preparing for what maybe some other teams are setting themselves up to have some issues?
Yeah, I mean, you got to feel pretty good for what the Chiefs have done. That it seems that their preparation has been probably about as sharp as it could be, and from what we know, and for this time of year, and a lot of what we're still talking about. I mean, you're leaning on two things. You're leaning on the fact that Andy Reid is probably one of the most organized coaches in the league, who's got his own plan in place and has been doing it for long enough that everything's a routine. These guys all know what to expect. So the stuff that they were doing, it's not stuff that they can do on the field, but it's the stuff that they would do in meeting rooms all the time anyway. So, some of it was just adapting it for the format. So the Chiefs felt really good about where they're at as far as that goes. Still, the difficulty they're going to face, the same thing a lot of other teams face, is going to be how you get the rookies in, how quickly you can get them up to speed, some of the newcomers, how they, get into the plan. But you know what? At the same time, not every team has been the same. I mean, some teams have treated this, offseason differently than the Chiefs have, and maybe not as hardcore. Maybe is a better word than serious. But then you got teams like the Saints. Sean Payton just packed it in, said, "No, don't worry about it. I'll see you in July." We'll see how that works out. All the teams have kind of done it a little bit differently, but I know the Chiefs feel pretty good with what they've done to this point.
And I think that, and looking forward to what they have to do getting together again, that probably helps them. Just the routine of being where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be, when it feels natural in the course of the year, I think has to help. When you look at what's going on in baseball, in other things around the country with these small clusters of outbreaks, a number of states are seeing cases rise again. Quite frankly, states where a lot of the Chiefs players are from, I don't know if they're still vacationing there, going home or whatever, but how concerned are you about what happens if a couple of the Chiefs players pick up this virus?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on how the NFL approaches it. If you look at what they've done at the college level, from what the experts are telling these organizations, sports organizations, about how to handle it, these college teams have done the exact opposite. I have no idea what they were thinking. And if you haven't seen, some of the inside story about the Kansas State outbreak and, some of the players who picked it up and that they think, that maybe some of these positive tests are coming from a party. No, that's not what you can do. If the NFL does it right, if they do it the way that the experts are telling them, which is frankly, they're going to have to bring the players in for 2 weeks before they ever have a workout. They're going to bring the players in. They're going to test everyone and then isolate them from each other even for 14 days. That's what you got to do to create the bubble. And then from there, then you can start having workouts. So, to a degree, I mean, the NFL is going to have to look at their schedule and see, when they want to bring these players back. But I can tell you from, talking to people, and you look at some of these examples that you've already gotten, especially at the college level, even in some of the NFL players and some of these other teams that have been working on their own, if you just get these guys back together and start working out and let them go back home, go to the grocery stores, lead their normal lives, dine out, you're going to have these outbreaks continue to, the only way that you can mitigate it is with the hardcore bubble. Yeah. And if the NFL doesn't do that, then they're going to have some problems. And even if they do implement the hardcore bubble, then I think the real question is going to be how many people want to go along with it, because there might be some players, there could be some coaches who don't want to make that sacrifice. That's why I've been saying that, I think this is like a 39-step process for the NFL to get back into action. And frankly, I think they're only on step 2 because there is so much work to be done, things to iron out. I know they've been working on it, and a lot of it's not public, but there's still so many steps when it comes to working with the NFLPA, getting the players on board, getting a process in place, getting facilities ready. They're not close to that being ready yet.
And I think that process is going to be really interesting. We've heard a couple of little things about attempting to test players 3 times a week. That's all well and good, but I don't know if there's anybody specifically on staff right now that is used to administering those tests. We've heard news reports that part of the problem with false negatives, false positives on some of these, specifically the swab tests, are due to inaccurate conduction of the test itself. They need experts at taking samples. Do you see an expansion of the Chiefs, either training staff or a dedicated medical staff to take care of this testing?
Well, the NFL usually takes this stuff pretty seriously. The problem is really it's this time of year, and the way that they have gone about the offseason is that they have not had a testing plan in place for the players right now. They're really not going to have an NFL procedure in place until July. And at that point, they are probably going to have, missed some things. There's going to be some things that have slipped through the cracks. And, we'll see. I mean, maybe they're going to have a lot of players who already have antibodies in place. Based on what we've seen so far, I mean, that's quite likely. But you're also going to see plenty of positive tests. And once you get, and remember, it's not just the players that are going to be in this bubble that you've got to isolate. I mean, because you can take the players and put them up in a hotel and keep them from going home all you want to. But if you're not doing the same thing with the equipment managers, and you're not doing the same thing with PR guys, you're not doing everything, the people that work in the kitchens, feed them. If you don't do the same thing with all these different other groups, you're still just opening up, Pandora's box for what can happen.
Yeah.
And hey, I still say the NFL, at least they are in the position to see what happens in some other leagues. Mm-hmm. But, what we've also seen is that none of the other leagues have been seamless with how they've been able to negotiate this. And Major League Baseball is worse than anybody. But I can't tell you right now that the NFL is not going to be in that kind of same ballpark, because the NFLPA, I don't think, is just going to want to show up, in July for training camps with no changes. They're going to want some things addressed before they do that.
I want to take a second and move forward specifically to the Chiefs and what they are set up to do themselves. And I want to start to follow up on something that you said in the last segment. Is it enough to have a unique relationship? One of the Chiefs' core sponsors is KU Medical. They have that resource to pull from. And can you see that becoming something that is not only more prominent for the coming season, but something that they really have to rely on?
Yeah, I mean, and the Chiefs aren't any different in that regard from a lot of NFL teams, in that they do have a medical staff. It's not necessarily a full-time group, but there are people that are on the payroll or at least contracted to work for the team. And it's not just, they have surgeons, Dr. Schreppel, I know, is, their main doctor. He's the guy that probably, the name, because he's the one that set Patrick Mahomes' kneecap back into place on the field.
Thanks, Doc.
So they've got those guys available and those men and women available if they need them. But you're right. I mean, for handling this, I think they are absolutely going to have to staff up a little bit as far as the people who are around the team full time. And you're right. I mean, to do the testing and to do it adequately and accurately, they're going to have medical resources on staff that they don't have right now. And I don't think there's any trouble with them getting them. But, at the same time, I mean, they've got to be willing to, pay for it and to make it happen.
And it's one thing for the league to say, go ahead. We're allowing you to add to your staffs to X number of people or whatever, because there are currently staff counts across the league in terms of maximums, correct?
Yeah, there are. And I can't remember exactly how it is as far as, from the medical staff. But the NFL, I mean, they, to their credit, they usually have a pretty good, track record for allowing teams to have, maybe it's more, appropriate for, emergency situations, because that's usually what they're talking about. For like a, Chiefs practice, there's, up in training camp, I mean, they've got, medics on the go and everything. And their game day prep, I mean, I've had a chance to go through as a tour of the facilities that they have at the stadium and what what medical, physicians are on hand during the games. But yeah, now you're talking about extending that really through Monday through Saturday and doing more of that. And I don't think there's any problem with the NFL would probably waive a lot of that and say, you know what, hey, if any people that you need to treat, COVID-19, don't worry about limits. Go ahead and put them on, do whatever you need to do. And we're not going to worry about there being a maximum. We might set a minimum, but I don't think they'd be worried about the high end. Yeah.
And that's something that they're just going to have to do. In terms of feeding that bubble, they have to have those staff on hand. But the bubble itself intrigues me. Like you said, you can sequester players together. I think it's even really interesting that I've heard somebody speak to the idea of having to sequester position groups together. Because like people have said, if your fourth string tailback comes in with the virus and sits in that meeting room with your starter and his backup, now all of a sudden you've got a specific position that can be decimated all at one time.
Yeah, and and that's one of the things that popped up last week was the report that the NFL may be considering expanding practice squads to 16 players. That also plays into it and that's a question that has to be answered because injuries happen. And inside the bubble, it won't be a case of where you can just go out on the street and sign a free agent. If you're going to sign a free agent and he's not on a team and he's not inside the bubble, a guy's going to have to be tested. He's going to have to sit out for 14 days before you can get him into practice if they do it correctly. So, yeah, you're seeing them trying to figure out a way to maybe open up the number of players and expand it. But, yeah, I mean, and Jim Harbaugh with the Ravens had some excellent points. I mean, some of the things that the NFL is saying as far as how they think that practices should be conducted are not entirely based in reality. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think that, NFL's different than soccer. I mean, it's just a different sport, the way that it's played. You don't have you can play the game without players as in close contact as they are consistently. And NFL has the most players on the field in close contact of any sport that's out there. So obviously I think it's going to have the most difficult challenge with that. And you're right. I mean, maybe it means keeping your quarterbacks away because if your quarterback gets sick, you're hosed. And the NFL can't afford that. And that's why, I wonder too, I mean, quality of the product is going to have to be a consideration because I don't think that they can just say that, we're going to play football, but it may not be very good football if a bunch of guys get sick, if a bunch of coaches get sick and can't participate, then you're not getting what, fans are paying for.
I think it's a really interesting scenario. And for those of you out there who think, oh, this isn't a big deal, they get sick, they'll miss a game or two. If all the quarterbacks get sick, we're talking about watching Travis Kelce throw passes. So this is an issue, okay? Beyond that, though, like you said, expanding to 16 for the practice squad, having somebody that you've already signed is again in the bubble in the team facility. I assume it would be the Adams Park or somewhere close that has access to the facility. But then you like that airlock kind of thing 2 weeks before they can actually join. You have gaps in your lineup in that time. Could we see things where if this does happen and teams don't want to forfeit a game, but they have specific issues at a given position, could we see changes to the way games are played, say without tight ends or Lord forbid your offensive line group gets hit and you can only field 4 offensive linemen. What do you do?
Well, those are the type of things they're going to have answers to. And if they don't have answers to them by the beginning of training camp, then I don't know how the NFLPA says, hey, yeah, let's just start practicing and see how it goes. I mean, those are things that you're going to have to, I think, have laid out. And like I said, I know that the NFL, they've got a couple of different committees that have been working on this, and a lot of it has been done out of the public's eye. But we're going to have to find out in the next month or so just how in-depth those plans are, because you need to have an answer to that. And that's why I say that, the quality of the product that they put out there has got to be a concern, because, the NFL can't afford to put their players in positions where they're maybe doing things that they're not used to, playing out of position. They're having to play more snaps than maybe they're ready for. There's a lot of different things that could go into that. And they've got to be prepared for just making sure that they're not just playing football, but they're playing good football that's going to keep people safe.
Yeah, I don't want to see 3-man lines in the Arena League look. And folks, if Travis Kelce's the starter at quarterback, that means Chris Jones is the backup, and this is scary now. I don't know where that goes from that point. Maybe Wildcat all day long. I don't know.
Nobody wants to see replacement football, which, hey, it could be.
And do you think that it could ever get to the point where there's enough, if a team gets hit hard enough by this virus, that there could be forfeitures in this season, knowing that the league wants to play this season regardless?
I think, frankly, I think everything is on the table at this point. I mean, and that is, and from the league standpoint, everything's on the table for them. I mean, if you think right now that there's 100% certainty that the NFL season is going to start on time, I haven't talked to anybody who thinks that inside the league. I mean, for the most part, the varying opinions are from everywhere from, hey, we think we can play. Maybe it's not going to be 100% capacity. Maybe it'll be 50% capacity, but we think we can play with fans in the stands. All the way to the other extreme, where there are people who tell you, no, they do not think the football is going to be played this year. I mean, that's the range. And so in between there, there's a lot of other possibilities that they do play, but a team suffers an outbreak, can't play, it's going to have to forfeit. There's a lot of different scenarios. And that's why I say, once again, if I'm the NFLPA, I want answers to all these questions before we start showing up to training camp, because I don't know why there's any purpose in putting yourself at risk if you don't know what's going to happen once games start getting played.
And if it comes down to that, folks, I'll do some kind of live stream. You can watch Chris, or maybe I'll get Therese to come play me in Madden, kick my butt. But that's about as much action as you're going to get. When we get back from this one, I want to change subjects for a minute. Now, what we saw on Monday was that Dak Prescott has signed his franchise tag. Comes in a little over 31, as I believe it was reported. I'm not 100% on that. But this has been a contract that a lot of folks have been keying the Patrick Mahomes contract off of, which I think is kind of ridiculous because I don't think they're near the same level quarterback. But what do you think it does in terms of moving things along towards that eventuality of Patrick being signed to an extension? And does it have any effect on Chris Jones's contract situation?
Yeah, I think it's probably is a little bit of its own, and it's not going to influence those two directly. Now, there might be some commonality between Dak Prescott and Chris Jones that you could see maybe Chris Jones signing his tender, and maybe earlier than you expect, just because the money is there. He knows that it's not going to change. He knows that it doesn't matter if it's July 15th or now, the same offer is going to be there. And I don't think that there's any indication whatsoever that there's going to be a long-term deal in place. So at some point, hey, maybe it's better just go ahead and get it done and over with. That might be the bigger commonality between them. With Mahomes, I do think that just this quarterback market this offseason in particular is interesting, because I thought there was a possibility there was so much movement in the quarterback market with so many teams, guys changing teams. And even though they're veterans, even though it's, Rivers, Brady, Breeze was technically a free agent, able to negotiate a new deal. I thought there was a possibility that one of those deals might boost the ceiling on quarterback contracts, but they haven't. Out there, it still is, Russell Wilson is still a top deal out there. So that's what you're comparing it to. I still, as far as Mahomes and getting a deal done, I would still be stunned if it happens this year. I think after the season is the much more likely target, and I think that's what both sides are targeting. They know there's just too much uncertainty up in the air right now, and that's why I think you're absolutely looking into the offseason before it gets done, and I don't think that bothers either side. I think they're both comfortable with it.
Yeah, if I'm Patrick, I wouldn't want to sign that now, because that means if that cap does go down, if the worst case scenario that you talked about comes true and there are no fans in seats, the revenue that the NFLPA suggested might be a $3 billion revenue loss. That cuts into the cap in a way that he might lose all of his targets. So if I'm Patrick, I'm okay. I got my 5th-year option coming at 24.8. I'm comfortable with that. The question for me then becomes, like you said, maybe Chris Jones signs early knowing that this isn't a likely scenario to change. Does that allow anything else for him to come in? Once that's signed, do you think that loosens any of the strings here as the season might be delayed, that maybe that makes it more palatable to sign a lower contract?
Yeah, I mean, possibly. I mean, that's why I think that, I wouldn't be surprised if they just want to get this behind them. I mean, like I said, I mean, we have seen no movement whatsoever that these two sides are anywhere close to a long-term deal. And given the situation in the market, neither side would be in, I think, right place to sign a long-term deal right now. It's just the parameters aren't there to get it done. So, yeah, I mean, I could see going ahead and just getting the deal done, knowing, because Chris Jones knows it's not going to change. I mean, that contract tender is there. It's going to be the same where he signs it now or July 15th. So I would not be sorry, and it could go beyond that. But I think with everything else going on, I think that, Jones knows what the deal is. He knows what he can get paid, what he would get paid. Go ahead and take the guarantee, do what he can to try and get as much money as he can this year under the deal with all the questions that are out there, and not try and push it. I mean, I don't think that there was any, even under normal circumstances, I don't think there was any intention for Jones to hold out this season. I still think he's going to play for the Chiefs. And if that's the case, yeah, I mean, at some point, deadline isn't a big deal. I mean, could a deal still get done? It's not non-zero. I mean, yeah, these two sides could, but I have a hard time believing that with the way things are right now.
Just so everyone can hear it from someone who isn't me, none of this makes it any more likely that Chris Jones gets traded, right?
No. The chances of Chris Jones getting traded to me is almost non-zero. I mean, that's just not going to happen. Yeah, I know there's been, speculation out there. Hey, wouldn't it be great to trade Chris Jones for Jamal Adams? Not going to happen. I mean, you had the same exact problem. Both teams would have the exact same problem, which is a guy that they wouldn't be able to necessarily sign long-term because you don't know what's going on in the market. Mm-hmm. And certainly the Jets aren't going to give up Adams for a guy that is even closer to being over the edge. I mean, at least Adams, you still have control contract-wise. Jones is, you trade him and you give up anything for him, you've got to now sign into a long-term deal that you don't know what you can afford. And that's part of what's holding up the Jets right now anyway. So no, and I've seen some other, speculation that, hey, maybe the Seahawks would send a first and a third. Once again, no team in the NFL is sending a first and a third for a player that they know that they have to sign to a deal in this market when it makes no sense to give out the money right now. I mean, there's just absolutely, the market is completely frozen. I mean, there's a reason why you're not seeing any movement in trades or free agencies for almost 3 months now. And that's not going to unfreeze anytime soon.
And that same team, the Seahawks, there's a reason that Clowney hasn't been signed to a long-term contract
Absolutely.
that I know of, right? So the whole league is on lockdown until they get in the bubble, which locks them down even farther. So it's a series of airlocks as far as I can tell.
Pretty much.
Okay, well, that's all right. Last thing, and it is kind of worst case scenario, doom and gloom. I don't want to be negative, but if that shortfall does come through, or anything like it, anything significant, and we do see a pullback in what the salary cap can be for next season, how much does that change what the Chiefs have to do for what their longer term plans were in signing Patrick, in possibly trying to get Chris back, in what they have to do with some of their other veterans that are approaching new extensions or having to make a choice?
Yeah, I mean, and scenarios, once again, I mean, they run the gamut. I mean, there's a lot of different things that could happen with the salary cap over the next couple of seasons. And, and one thing I would certainly expect is that, there's been discussion that, hey, that both sides are talking about trying to find ways to mitigate the losses, that maybe they would find a way to spread out any decrease in the cap over one season. spreading it out over multiple seasons so it wouldn't hit as hard.
Mm-hmm.
So I would expect that the league's going to try and do things to limit that. But when it comes to Mahomes, no, don't worry. I mean, yeah, the Chiefs would release everyone on the roster they had to keep Mahomes. So that's not a problem.
Start over.
That's not a problem. And go back once again. I mean, the salary cap, as we've often talked about, I mean, it's navigatable. You can continue to renegotiate. You can do things to move money around. The Chiefs have got some guys that are getting paid, making a lot of money, that have shown a willingness to do that. Yeah, you might have to get too creative with some of the deals, like Matthew, like Frank Clark, Fisher, Schwartz would start, fitting in those categories. There's some things you'd have to do to be creative to make sure that they get their money, that while still saving money against the cap in the short term. You have to pay the piper eventually at some point. But yeah, I mean, I don't think the Chiefs see themselves in a situation where cap-wise that they would be forced to choose between Mahomes and 25 guys. It wouldn't be quite like that. But at the same time, as a Chiefs fan, you're going to have to remember that if you're going to sign Patrick Mahomes to a long-term deal, it means that you're going to have to pick and choose. You're not going to be able to make all the moves that you want to make.
Yeah. And somebody asked me the other day, and I put it like this: it's a fence with an open cattle guard gate. The gate might get smaller, but it's still open. And you can do some things, and I hope it doesn't come to that. I guess we'll find out in the long run, but we'll end on an optimistic note that everything's going to work out, and Patrick,
everything's going to be okay, right?
Right? There we go. Thank you for your time today, Matt.
Thanks, Ryan. Good talking to you.
Yeah. Folks, we'll catch you next time. Make sure you hit the Locked On Chiefs podcast as well as the RGR channel. We'll talk to you then.